A year after the wedding that never was, I was sitting in my new, sunlit apartment downtown when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. NNHI. Amy. This is David from the coffee shop. I know this is probably weird, but I was wondering if you'd like to get dinner sometime? And David, the kind, funny architect who worked at the coffee shop I'd started frequenting. We'd been chatting for weeks, just friendly banter while he made my morning latte. He was nothing like Maverick. Steady where Maverick had been flashy, genuine where Maverick had been charming. And I stared at the text, a flutter of something that might have been excitement stirring in my chest. A year ago, I would have said no, convinced I wasn't ready. But I was healed, not because I'd forgotten what happened, but because I had learned from it. I had learned what I would and would not accept. I had learned to value myself, and I typed back, "I'd love to. When were you thinking?" NNHI's response came quickly. "How about Saturday?" As I set my phone down, I caught my reflection in the mirror across the room. The woman looking back at me was different, happier, more confident, more at peace. She bore little resemblance to the anxious bride who had woken up so full of dreams exactly 1 year ago. I thought about Maverick and Penelope, and for the first time I felt nothing but a distant, quiet pity. Their betrayal had been the catalyst for the best thing that ever happened to me, learning to love and value myself, and I thought about my great-aunt Rose's words from that terrible, wonderful day. Now you live. You live your life for yourself, and that's exactly what I was doing. I was building a life that was entirely my own, filled with people who saw my worth and reflected it back to me. The girl who had stood in that hotel room doorway, watching her world crumble, was gone. In her place was a woman who knew she was enough, all by herself. A woman who had learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have ever happened. I smiled at my reflection, raised an imaginary glass, and made a silent toast. To Amy for finally choosing herself. The party that wasn't a wedding became a local legend. For weeks, people in town talked about the bride who threw her own reception, the one who chose herself. I didn't care about the gossip. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself, not for the approval of others, and it was intoxicating. NNTHE, months that followed were a period of rediscovery. I threw myself into my work as a kindergarten teacher with a renewed passion. I started painting again, something I'd given up years ago, filling my small new apartment with canvases of bold, vibrant colors. I traveled, taking small weekend trips to places I'd always wanted to see, no longer waiting for someone else's permission. 3 months after the wedding that never was, I was sitting in my new apartment when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered it. The voice was small, shaky. It was Penelope. I almost hung up. I hadn't spoken to her since that day. "What do you want, Penelope?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. I wanted to apologize," she said. "I know it's too late, but I needed to try. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did." She took a shaky breath. "I was jealous of you, Amy. You had everything I wanted. You were so sure of yourself, so happy. And Maverick, he was having second thoughts about the wedding." NNTHE words were a small, sharp sting. "Second thoughts?" "He told me he felt trapped," she said quietly. "And instead of being a good friend and telling him to talk to you, I encouraged it. I made him feel like his feelings were valid." She started to cry. "We're not together." It fell apart almost immediately. Turns out, a relationship built on betrayal doesn't have a very solid foundation. "You're right," I said simply. It was unforgivable. After I hung up, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I just felt closure. It was a chapter that was finally completely over, and then life moved on. I was promoted to head of the kindergarten department at my school. I started dating again, cautiously at first, but then with a growing sense of hope. I met David, a kind, funny architect who loved my paintings and had never even heard of Maverick or Penelope. He was steady and genuine, an open book where Maverick had been a collection of secrets. NNMY, Great Aunt Rose's words from that terrible, wonderful day became my mantra. You live your life for yourself, and that's exactly what I was doing. I was building a life that was entirely my own, filled with people who valued and respected me. The girl in the wedding dress who had stood in that hotel room doorway, watching her world crumble, was gone. In her place was a woman who knew she was enough, all by herself. The crowd erupted. Some people cheered, some gasped, and a few actually applauded. I heard someone in the back yell, "You go, girl!" And despite everything, I smiled. Maverick stepped forward, his face a mask of red, impotent rage and embarrassment. "Amy, you can't just—" "I can," I said simply. And I did. He looked around at all the faces staring at him, at the mixture of disgust and disappointment in people's eyes. His own family was looking at him like they didn't recognize him, and I turned to Penelope, who was now being half supported by her own shocked parents. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "I hope whatever you thought you were getting was worth losing the one person who loved you most in this world." Her face crumpled completely. I turned back to the crowd, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Now," I said, my voice carrying a note of genuine happiness for the first time all day, "who wants to party?" What happened next was something I never could have predicted. The reception that was supposed to celebrate my marriage became a celebration of my freedom, my strength, my refusal to accept less than I deserved. People I barely knew came up to hug me, to share their own stories of dodging bullets, of leaving relationships that were slowly killing them. My cousin Emma grabbed the microphone and announced, "This is now officially the best dodged a bullet party in Millbrook history." The band, after a moment of confused consultation, launched into a defiant rendition of "I Will Survive." Maverick and Penelope tried to leave quietly, but they had to walk through the crowd to get to the parking lot. The silence that followed them was a physical thing, a wall of judgment that was more damning than any shout. Mrs. Bennet stopped in front of me before she followed her son. Her eyes were red from crying. "Amy," she said quietly, "I am so sorry. I thought I raised him better than this." "You did," I said gently. "This isn't your fault. Sometimes people just choose to be less than they could be." As the sun began to set, my Great Aunt Rose appeared at my side. "How are you holding up, child?" she asked. "Better than I expected," I said honestly. "Instead of being broken, I feel free, like I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale." NSHE nodded knowingly. "That's because you were settling, sweetheart. Now you live. You live your life for yourself, not for anyone else. You figure out what makes you happy, and you never, ever settle for less than you deserve again." And NHER words stayed with me. For the past year, I had been so focused on the wedding, on the idea of being married, that I'd lost sight of what I actually wanted. I'd ignored the red flags, the small moments of disrespect from Maverick, because I was so in love with the fairy tale. Now the fairy tale was over. And for the first time, I was excited to write my own story. More gasps, more shocked murmurs. I could see people turning to stare at Maverick and Penelope, who both looked like they wanted the ground to swallow them whole. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," I said, though that last part wasn't entirely true. "I'm telling you this because you deserve to know why you're not witnessing a wedding today. You took time out of your lives to be here, and you deserve the truth." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. "But I also want you to know something else. This isn't the end of my story. This is just the end of one chapter. A chapter that, frankly, I'm glad to be closing." When I turned to look directly at Maverick and Penelope. "You see, I've realized something today. I've realized that I don't want to marry someone who could lie to my face for months. I don't want to build a life with someone who could betray me with my best friend and then show up to our wedding like nothing happened." My voice was getting stronger, more confident with each word. "And Penelope," I continued, turning to my former best friend, "I've realized that I don't want someone in my life who could smile at me while stabbing me in the back. someone who could help me plan my wedding while actively destroying it. NNTHE crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. N. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong. You're all invited to stay for the reception. The food is paid for, the band is here, and frankly, I could use a party right about now. We're going to celebrate the fact that I just dodged the biggest bullet of my life. A few people actually laughed at that, a ripple of support that warmed me to my core. But Maverick and Penelope, I said, my voice turning to ice, you are not invited. In fact, I never want to see either of you again. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I believe you. I turned back to the crowd. I want to thank you all for being here today, not for the wedding that didn't happen, but for witnessing the moment I chose myself over people who didn't deserve me. And I paused, looking out at all those faces, some crying, some smiling, some still in shock. But they were all looking at me with something that looked like respect. I took a step back from the microphone, then forward again. Oh, and one more thing, I said, looking directly at Maverick. I slipped the engagement ring off my finger, the one he'd saved for 8 months to buy, and held it up. This belongs to you, I said, but I'm not giving it back. I turned and threw the ring as hard as I could toward the pond at the edge of the property. It arced through the air, catching the sunlight for a moment before disappearing with a small, satisfying splash. We're going back to the venue, I announced, my voice ringing with a newfound authority that silenced the room. All of us. Right now, Amy, my mom said carefully, her hand on my arm. Maybe you should take some time. No, I shook my head firmly. I've processed enough. Those people, our guests, they came here to witness a wedding. They deserve to know why there isn't going to be one. Maverick stepped forward, his face a mask of pure panic. You can't be serious. Amy, please, think about what you're doing. This will ruin everything. Everything is already ruined, Maverick, I said simply. The only question is whether I'm going to let you control the narrative or if I'm going to tell the truth myself. Great Aunt Rose stood up from her chair, her small frame radiating a surprising strength. The girl's right, she said, her voice carrying the authority of 8 decades. Better to face the music than let it play without you. I looked at her gratefully. Everyone out, I commanded. We're going to the venue. Maverick and Penelope, you're coming too. I'm not going anywhere, Penelope whispered, clutching the hotel bathrobe tighter around herself. I can't face those people. You should have thought about that before you slept with my fiancé, I replied coldly. Get dressed, both of you. You created this mess, and you're going to be there while I clean it up. NNTHE drive back to Riverside Manor was surreal. I sat in the back of my father's car, a bride in a white dress on her way not to an altar, but to a reckoning. The venue was exactly as we'd left it, a perfect, beautiful stage for a celebration that would never happen. Guests were milling around the gardens, their faces a sea of confusion and concern. Linda, the wedding coordinator, rushed over as soon as she saw us. Amy, thank goodness! What's happening? Gather everyone, I told her, my voice steady. Guests, vendors, staff, I want them all in the ceremony space in 5 minutes. There isn't going to be a wedding, but there is going to be an announcement, and word spread like wildfire. Within minutes, nearly 200 people had gathered in the white chairs arranged so perfectly for a celebration. I stood at the back of the aisle, watching them, my heart pounding. Maverick and Penelope had arrived and were standing off to the side, looking like prisoners awaiting their sentence. I walked down that aisle alone, my dress rustling with each step. When I reached the front, I turned to face the crowd, took the microphone, and waited for the murmuring to die down. Thank you all for being here, I began. I know you're confused, and you deserve an explanation. I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on Maverick and Penelope. There isn't going to be a wedding today, not because of cold feet, but because this morning, I discovered that my fiancé and my maid of honor have been having an affair. NNTHE reaction was immediate and explosive. A collective gasp. Shocked exclamations, people turning to stare. I let the noise settle before continuing. I found them together in his hotel room about an hour ago. And based on what I discovered, this has been going on for months. You want to know what the real tragedy is? I continued, my voice getting stronger, ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. It's not that my fiancé cheated on me. It's not even that my best friend betrayed me. It's that they are both such cowards that they couldn't even be honest about it. I walked over to Maverick, stopping just inches from him, forcing him to look up into my face. If you loved her, if you wanted to be with her, you should have told me. You should have called off the wedding. You should have given me the chance to walk away with my dignity intact. My voice dropped to a fierce whisper. Instead, you let me stand in front of a mirror this morning, thinking I was the luckiest woman in the world. You let 150 people gather to witness a lie. I turned to Penelope, who was now sobbing uncontrollably, her perfect makeup a ruined mess. And you, I said, my voice dripping with the venom of 1,000 unspoken hurts, you helped me address the invitations to this wedding. You held my hand while I cried about how nervous I was. You told me I deserved this happiness while you were actively, systematically destroying it. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words lost in her sobs. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said flatly. Sorry doesn't give me back the last year of my life. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation of having my wedding day turn into this public spectacle. I looked around the room one last time at all these faces staring at me with a mixture of pity, anger, and shock, and suddenly I knew exactly what I needed to do. The path forward was clear, as if a fog had finally lifted. N. I want everyone to go back to the venue, I said calmly. I want you to tell the guests exactly what happened here. I want you to tell them that there will be no wedding today because the groom was too busy sleeping with the Maid of Honor to show up. Amy, Mrs. Bennet said, her voice breaking. Please, think about this. Think about your reputation. My reputation? I laughed, and this time the sound wasn't bitter. It was almost free. Mrs. Bennet, with all due respect, I am not the one who should be worried about my reputation right now. I walked to the window and looked out at the beautiful June day, at the life that was supposed to be mine, and then I turned back, and... Actually, I said, a new, dangerous idea blooming in my mind. I have a better idea. The next 20 minutes were a surreal, nightmarish theater of chaos. Maverick and Penelope scrambled to get dressed, their movements clumsy with panic, whispering frantically to each other as they tried to construct a lie big enough to cover the wreckage of their betrayal. I simply sat in the armchair by the window, still in my wedding dress, and watched them. My family hovered nearby, a silent, protective wall around me. NNTHE first knock came at 2:45. It was Maverick's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, his sister Katie, and his best man, Tom. They crowded into the doorway, their faces shifting from confusion to shock to a deep, gut-wrenching horror as they took in the scene. The disheveled bed, Penelope in a bridesmaid's dress that was clearly thrown on in a hurry, and Maverick, pale and trembling, unable to meet his own father's eyes. What is this? Mrs. Bennet whispered, her hand flying to her throat. Maverick, what have you done? More people arrived in waves, summoned by my calls. The wedding coordinator, looking frazzled and on the verge of tears. My aunts and uncles, their faces grim. The room filled with shocked gasps and angry, whispered accusations. Maverick's father, a man I had always respected for his quiet strength, looked as if he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Katie was staring at her brother with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. How could you do this? She whispered, her voice shaking. How could you do this to Amy? It was a mistake, Maverick said desperately, his voice cracking. A stupid, drunken mistake. Amy, please. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. We can work through this. We can postpone the wedding, go to counseling, and work through this. The words came out louder than I intended, cutting through the horrified murmurs in the room. Everyone fell silent, turning to look at me. I stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from my white silk dress. In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, a sharp, deep ache. But underneath it, something else was rising, clarity. "You want me to forgive you for sleeping with my best friend?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "You want me to pretend this never happened and marry you anyway?" "Yes," he said quickly, desperately. "Yes, exactly. Amy, I love you. This doesn't change that. Penelope means nothing to me." "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. He fell silent. "Just stop talking." I turned to the room, to the faces of our families and friends. "I want everyone to understand something," I said, my voice carrying clearly. "This isn't just about what happened this afternoon. This is about who these people really are." I walked over to the dresser where Penelope's purse sat open. Inside, I could see her phone and something that made my blood run cold. A hotel key card. Not for this room. For a different one. "NN Penelope," I said, holding up the key card. "What's this?" "Room 412 at the Riverside Hotel." I turned to Maverick. "Isn't that where you stayed last month, when you said you were visiting your college friend?" NNTHE silence in the room was deafening. Maverick's face went white. Penelope started to sob. "How long?" I asked, my voice like steel. "How long have you two been doing this behind my back?" Neither of them answered. They didn't need to. The truth was a toxic cloud, filling every corner of the room. While I was planning our wedding, they were planning this. I turned back to the room, my own pain reflected in the horrified faces around me. But I wasn't humiliated anymore. I was angry. The sight hit me like a physical blow. All the air left my lungs. The room, with its heavy curtains and the cloying scent of champagne, began to spin. Behind me, I heard my mother gasp, a sharp, wounded sound. My father cursed under his breath, a low, guttural rumble of fury. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, a statue in white silk, taking in every single, soul-crushing detail. The empty champagne bottle on the nightstand, Penelope's jewelry scattered on the dresser, the way they looked so comfortable together, so natural, as if this wasn't a shocking betrayal but a familiar routine. NNTHE question echoed in the silent spinning room. How long? How long had they been lying to me, looking me in the eye, planning my wedding while they were planning this? And Maverick stirred in the bed, his eyes fluttering open. It took him a moment to process the scene. The open door, the light flooding in, my family standing there like avenging angels. And then, he saw me. His face went white, a stark, sickly pale. "And Amy," he breathed, scrambling to sit up, accidentally waking Penelope in the process. "Amy, I can explain." "Explain?" The word came out as a whisper, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. "Explain what? Exactly, Maverick?" "Explain why you're in bed with my best friend on our wedding day. Explain why 150 people are sitting in a garden waiting for a groom who's too busy screwing my maid of honor to show up." Penelope was awake now, her eyes wide with a dawning, panicked horror. She grabbed for the sheet, her movements frantic. "Amy, please," she stammered, her voice shaking. "It's not what it looks like." "It's not what it looks like?" I laughed, and the sound was sharp and broken, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. "It looks like my fiancé and my best friend have been betraying me for months. It looks like the two people I trusted most in the world are cowards and liars. So please, Penelope, tell me, what is it actually?" Neither of them had an answer. I turned around slowly, my gaze falling on my family. My mother was crying openly now. My father looked like he wanted to commit murder. And Great Aunt Rose, she was just watching me with those sharp, intelligent eyes, her expression unreadable, waiting to see what I would do next. "And call them," I said, my voice suddenly calm, eerily steady. "What?" my mother asked, confused. "And call them," I repeated, my voice gaining strength. "Call Maverick's parents, call his sister, call his best man. Call everyone who is waiting for this wedding to happen. Tell them to come up here. Tell them they need to see this." "Amy, no," Maverick pleaded, scrambling for his clothes. "Please, let's just talk about this privately." "Privately?" I turned back to him, and I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest, extinguishing the last of the fluttering panic. "You want to talk about this privately after you humiliated me in front of our entire town?" "No, the time for privacy is over." I pulled out my own phone. "Mrs. Bennett? It's Amy. I need you and Mr. Bennett to come up to room 237 at the Millbrook Inn right now." "Yes, I know the wedding is supposed to start. Just come. And bring everyone. They say your wedding day is the happiest day of your life. They don't tell you it can also be the day your entire world burns to ash while you stand there in white silk, watching everything you believed in crumble. My name is Amy, and 3 months ago, I thought I had it all. At 26, I was a kindergarten teacher in our small town, in love with a man named Maverick. We'd been together for 4 years, and our wedding was set for a perfect summer day in June. My Maid of Honor was Penelope, my best friend since we were 7. She was the sister I chose, the keeper of my secrets, the one who cried harder than I did when my grandmother passed. When Maverick proposed, she was the first person I called. "This is going to be the most beautiful wedding ever," she'd screamed, and she threw herself into the planning with an almost manic enthusiasm. She helped me choose the venue, the flowers, the cake. "You deserve this happiness," she told me, squeezing my hand as we sat surrounded by fabric samples. "You're the kindest person I know." I trusted her completely. I trusted them both. Morning of June 15th was bright and clear. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, feeling a deep, unshakable sense of rightness. The house was already buzzing. My phone chimed with a text from Maverick, "Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you at the altar." Then one from Penelope, "Wedding day. I'm so excited I barely slept. This is going to be perfect." Hours flew by in a whirlwind of hairspray and nervous laughter. By noon, we were at the Riverside Manor, a venue that looked like it had been pulled from a fairy tale. Everything was perfect. "Maverick is going to lose his mind when he sees you," Penelope said, squeezing my arm. NNWE had an hour before the ceremony. At 1:30, Penelope excused herself to check on the flowers. At 1:45, my wedding coordinator called. "Amy, honey, we have a tiny situation." The groom seems to be running a few minutes late. A flutter of anxiety stirred in my stomach. Maverick was never late. At 2 o'clock, she called again. "Amy, we're going to need to delay just a bit longer. The groom still hasn't arrived, and we can't seem to reach him on his phone." Flutter became a knot of ice. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. I tried texting. No response. "Where's Penelope?" I asked my cousin, Emma. I haven't seen her since she left 20 minutes ago. She said, her own face now pale. I tried calling Penelope. Straight to voicemail, NNBY 215. The guests were restless. My parents appeared in the doorway of the bridal suite, their faces tight with a worry they were trying to hide for my sake. "The hotel," I said suddenly, my voice sharp. "Maverick stayed at the Millbrook Inn last night. Not seeing the bride before the wedding. Amy, maybe we should wait." My mom urged, but I was already moving, gathering the heavy skirts of my wedding dress. I had to know. My great-aunt Rose, 82 and sharp as a tack, appeared at my elbow. "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. A woman shouldn't have to face this kind of storm alone. Drive to the inn was a blur. My mind raced with 1,000 possible explanations, each one less likely than the last. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to look, a cold, ugly truth was already beginning to form. The desk clerk at the inn gave me a spare key to room 237 with a look of profound pity. The hallway stretched out before us, a long, silent path to a door I suddenly never wanted to open. I stood there for a moment, the key in my hand, listening. I could hear something from inside the room. Soft sounds. Movement. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. I slid the key into the lock, turned the handle and pushed the door open. and NTHE room was dim, the curtains drawn. And there, in the tangled sheets of the honeymoon suite, were Maverick and Penelope, naked, asleep, intertwined like lovers who had spent the night making memories that weren't mine.